Okay, so this video is going to be the guidance that will help you throughout the next several weeks in developing a research question. We're going to start here looking at the 1920s using the graphic organizer that is attached in this assignment. So if you click on that, it will open up this Google slide. And we're going to use this as our graphic organizer in the way that we will develop a graphic or a research question. So you can see here you have boxes to add details. Typically, the way that I say this is that you will use the link that is attached to create at least 3 details per box. Again, these aren't going to be long statements. They're going to be really short and to the point. And then you're going to use these ideas to develop your question. So here, let's go. Let's try the first example. So for the 1920s one, you're going to go down and find this link to Khan Academy, a presentation of information about the 1920s. So it's actually going to eventually load and it will take you to the 1920s America. So as you can see, this information will go up. Now, remember, what I said with the graphic organizer is we are going to have 4 boxes and we want 3 details for each box. That is our highest level. The absolute basic level, if you look back at the rubric right here, is that we have at least 1 detail for each topic so that we can write a research question that includes at least 2 subtopics for a 3. And so one of the things that we want to try to do is say, for example, we want to get a 2 on this. At the minimum is that we need to have at least 1 detail for each topic, but then we also need to write a research question. And it may be too large. What we want to try to get to eventually is a 4 where we have 3 subtopics coming from that. So let's see what that looks like. We are going to go ahead and try to fill out each of these boxes. So for each of those boxes, we have plenty of different things that we can choose from because all of these are each a topic. So let's start with the 19th Amendment. We click on this, we get an overview of what the 19th Amendment is with details, as well as a little intense, discussion of what this amendment was. So let's just start off from the beginning. How do we want to approach this? Probably the easiest way is to start with these little bullet points. We're going to be looking at the 19th Amendment. So our topic is going to be the 19th Amendment. Was the right to vote, regardless of sex. All right? So in other words, the 19th Amendment was the right to vote for women. So that's our one topic. One of the things that you might want to do in this is just to kind of, make the font a little smaller so you have more room to write, just to kind of keep it in an idea. The next thing is that we are going to go and say it was led by the National American Women's Suffrage Association. NWA. And one of the things we also want to kind of figure out is when this happened. It was ratified on August 18th, 1920. And that's that. I mean, so right now you're on a good start for one element of the 1920s was focused on this idea of the right to vote and the 19th Amendment. Pretty easy, right? So now all you got to do is go back, close this, and find 3 more to write about. You can do about consumption, movies and radio, American culture, so on and so forth. All right, so I'm going to fast forward here and give you these examples. So obviously what we did was these 3 examples, and then I just provided the basic ideas of Calvin Coolidge as the president, the reemergence of the KKK in the 1920s, and the idea of prohibition. All of these are topics that have to do with the 1920s. And if you go back to that website, you can actually find them all listed right here. We have Calvin Coolidge, we have the KKK, we have the idea of prohibition, which is right here. So all of these are things that you can use. So if you wanted, for this first example, to use all of these in the development of your own graphic organizer, that's great. But for this, you would only get a 2 because you have one example for each. You need to have at least 3 for all of them. For a 3, you need at least 2. All right. The question now is what we're going to write using these topics. So if you remember back to the grading, we need a research question with 3 subtopics. So the idea here is that you can actually get a 4, which is 1 detail each, or at least a 3, that is, because if you add these 2 together, with at least 3 subtopics. And what that means is that you're basically writing a question about the 1920s that applies to 3 different topics. So for example, I would write a question like, how did Calvin Coolidge deal with the issues of race and gender during the 1920s as president of the U.S.? So here we have a perfect number 4, a 4 question, because we have Calvin Coolidge, one of our topics. We have the idea of race, the emergence of the KKK, and we have the issue of gender, the idea of the 19th Amendment. So in that essence, we have a 4 question with at least a 2, which would give you a 3 for this idea. And ultimately, all you're doing for this is you're trying to include ideas from each of these subtopics in your question. And there's 2, and there's your 3rd, the idea of gender. So you may not use all these. In fact, you probably shouldn't use all 3. The thing you really want to stay away from, though, is writing a question that only applies to one of those boxes. All right, so for the future of this, there's always going to be this little link up here in your questions, in your research process. It'll also be in the summative for this, and you can click on this, and it will give you access back to this YouTube presentation to just remind you what you need to do for this process of writing a question. Please use that.